Though not a traditional matchup in the SEC, this is one that folks are starting to mark the calendars on a yearly basis and just flat out get used to doing that. It's gone down to the final play the last 2 years. Texas A&M hosting Alabama coming up on Saturday. We got Robert Behrens breaking down some Texas A&M football for us. You can join him on Good Bull Hunting on SB Nation. Robert, how's it going tonight?
Going well, man. Just counting down the days till game day.
Of course, yes, absolutely. Looking at Texas A&M, well, let's just kind of size it up from here. The biggest news during the offseason was, of course, bringing on Bobby Petrino as offensive coordinator. So through 5 games, what would be your assessment there?
I mean, I would say so far, pretty much a rousing success. The biggest thing that A&M fans wanted to see, I think, right off the bat was just whether this offense was going to be different, whether it was going to be just a higher in name only, or if it was actually going to be some substantial changes. And we've definitely gotten that. I think you've seen a lot more just aggressiveness as far as getting the ball downfield, but also just a lot more use of tempo. And that's not to say it's a super fast offense, but it's not just the bleed the play clock down to 5 seconds like you saw under Jimbo for a long time. So, but yeah, early returns for A&M fans, I think, are pretty ecstatic. A&M's been over 400 yards of offense in every single game so far this season. They've scored at least 27 points in every game this season, and so when you averaged 22 a year ago, being 27 or north, I think it's hard to complain too much about that. And I actually heard I think it was Connor O'Gara on another interview. He actually threw out the stat that the last time that a Jimbo Fisher coach team scored 27 plus in 5 straight games, it was in 2014 with Jameis Winston. So safe to say that you've seen a big change on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, the other big news, obviously, on that side of the ball just happened here in the last couple of weeks with Connor Weigman, and that's unfortunate to see. The game that I watched pretty much every play was the Miami game, and despite, depending on your perspective, you could call it a lopsided loss. You could say, well, Texas A&M with about 5 or 6 minutes left still had a shot there once he pulled off a 4th down touchdown play to get him within a score, but with little else supporting him in regards to a running game and with the defense giving up points, he had to throw it 53 times, and he was getting hit back there on a regular basis and just delivering play after play after play. And I just gained a lot of respect, not just for his talent, but his ability to lead and be tough and hang in there.
Yeah, and Wegman, you're right exactly. In that Miami game, as rough as that game was for A&M fans, that was a pretty crushing loss in week 2. Um, the one big silver lining out of that is everyone's like, okay, but no, Wegman is a dude. Wegman can play. But of course, it was only 2 weeks later. He goes down in the Auburn game, ends up being a broken ankle that's going to need surgery, and he's done for the year. So, that for most teams, I think that would totally tank your season. I'm not sure A&M's in that spot because you bring in Max Johnson, who is one of the best case scenario backups that you can find in the SEC, maybe in all of college football, just because he's a 4th-year player who has been a starter before, both at A&M and at his previous stop at LSU. The guy's thrown for over 4,000 yards in his career. So, you couldn't ask for a guy that's more ready for that stage to come in. And Max obviously came in that Auburn game, somewhat sparked the offense in the Auburn game that was kind of stagnating early, led A&M to victory in that game. And then, of course, again, this past weekend versus Arkansas.
Yeah, not too many teams, as you just alluded to, can go to the bench and pull a guy into the game that's thrown 27 touchdowns with 6 picks in a season in the SEC. And that's what he accomplished a couple of years ago at LSU. The other thing about him, and I may sound like a broken record and I didn't intend on, but the games that I've seen, even when he's taken it on the chin, even when the stats haven't looked good, it's been offensive line issues, and that guy will stand in there and deliver some throws under pressure. He will sometimes have guys hanging all over him, and he's still going to step into it and deliver it, even when he knows pain is just a second away.
Yeah, I think coming out of that Arkansas game, if you had a critique of Max, it was maybe just that when he was running the ball, he was maybe a little bit too aggressive. He actually ended up he lost a couple of fumbles in that game. One of which was because he rolled out of the pocket and he's rushing to get a first down and he dives and the guy puts a helmet on the ball and knocks it out. So especially when you're already on your backup, you maybe need to get that guy to maybe slide a little bit more when the game's not on the line. But yeah, I mean, but Max absolutely just looked like a gamer out there, and I was impressed because we all kind of thought of him as a guy that he had some sneaky athleticism, but for the most part, you kind of think of him as more of like a game manager. But yeah, he's been making some next level throws. He put it into some tight windows against Arkansas. The week before against Auburn, he had a deep, I think about a 48-yard bomb to Evan Stewart that, I mean, it was just a drop in the bucket between two defenders. It was the prettiest deep ball you'll ever see. So that's not to say that there's not going to be growing pains. There's not going to be mistakes that get made. But overall, the early returns are very positive for A&M to still have a lot to play for, even with their backup quarterback.
We've got Robert Behrens here. You can catch his work at SB Nation's Good Bull Hunting to track this game and everything Texas A&M, football and otherwise. Appreciate Robert being here to break down Texas A&M, Alabama. When you look at the rest of the weapons on the offense, of course, Aniyah Smith has been on campus for a long time. He's been a veteran, productive player. We've got, when you look at the recruiting hauls from the much publicized recruiting hauls from the last few years, Evan Stewart's been, when A&M fans got that signing, I'm sure there was much jubilation, and now he's delivering as a big time player. So two capable running backs, of course, Le'Veon Moss taking the lead now. Your thoughts about the skill position players?
I mean, maybe the most talented A&M has been at the skill positions on offense in recent memory, because you talked about Evan Stewart and Aniyah Smith out at receiver. You've also got Moose Muhammad, who is another slot receiver that comes off the bench. And one guy that had a great start to the season and then has been a little more under the radar is Noah Thomas. He's a guy, goes about 6'5", had 3 touchdowns in the first game of the year, another one against Miami. But then you kind of haven't seen him as much since. I think he's been battling injury, battling some personal stuff as well, some family issues. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's another guy that at any given moment could make a big play, make a game-changing play. And then at running back, you touched on it. It started off the year as more of a 3-headed monster with Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels, and then also the true freshman Reuben Owens. And you're still seeing a mix of all 3 of those guys, but the past 2 games, you really have started to see Le'Veon Moss, I think, assert himself as that lead back. He had 15 carries for, I think, 97 yards and a touchdown against Auburn, and then 17 carries for over 100 yards this past week against Arkansas. So it seems like A&M thinks they've found something with Moss, and he is a very he's quick, but he's a very physical runner. Great between the tackles guy. So I think especially against Alabama, you're going to see them probably try to feed him early and often to try to establish that run game.
And we certainly don't want to forget about the offensive line. The recruiting has been top-notch there as well. Is that unit living up to expectations?
Offensive line was maybe the biggest question mark on the team going into the year, because last season it was not good either, both in run defense and pass protection. They had some issues, and some of that was youth, some of that was injury. I think they had 10 different players actually make a start on the offensive line last season. They lost Bryce Foster, our center, for the season last year early on in the year. So the point is, going into this year, there was a lot of promise. You had a lot of returning production. You theoretically brought back all 5 starters, but you just didn't know what you were going to get from that group. And it's been a mixed bag, I would say, because the first few games of the year, especially running the football, they really failed to establish a dominant running game, even against some substandard competition. And you referenced against Miami, Miami threw some blitz packages at A&M that they did not handle well, and Wegman just kind of got battered in that game as a result. I think the good news for A&M is it does seem like every single game they're taking steps, they're getting better. Every game you're seeing the run game be more effective. I think the past 2 games, it may even be the past 3 games, A&M hasn't even allowed a sack. So they're giving their QBs time. The running game is still, I would say, it's a dominant run game, but they're starting to be effective in the run game that in a way that maybe they weren't early on in the year. And it's what you hope for a team that's still kind of figuring itself out, is that what the team that you saw in week 1 is going to be very different from the team that you see in week 6, week 7, on through the rest of the year.
Robert, of course, 7 sacks and 15 tackles for loss is some serious damage in the opponent's backfield. KJ Jefferson's one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country, and they really, they had defense aided points. They had a late touchdown that didn't matter. The A&M defense certainly did a job there. Nobody's going to sell the Auburn offense as being a thing of beauty either. They have all sorts of issues at quarterback and throwing the football downfield. However, again, it's still an SEC team with athletes all over the place, and they needed to scoop and score to provide their touchdown. Couldn't score on offense. So the defense really shaping into form with, again, a lot of guys that were familiar names from top-notch recruiting classes becoming, elite level type players.
Yeah, the defense has been a beyond pleasant surprise over the past few weeks, because I think most people saw that Miami game and they saw that defense get torched. Not necessarily in the run game. They actually did pretty well against the run in Miami. But just Miami threw the ball all over that A&M defense. And we all kind of said, oh, here we go again. It's, we finally got the offense fixed, but now the defense is going to be an issue all year. And I don't know if it's what they've done schematically is different. I'm not a big X's and O's guy. Or if it's just but something has changed in that room, because you referenced, 7 sacks against Arkansas, 15 tackles for loss against Arkansas. They did the same thing, those exact same numbers against Auburn. And as you said, maybe 2 offenses that aren't going to finish at the top of the conference at the end of the year. But I don't care who you play. If you get 7 sacks and 15 tackles for loss, that's a dominant defensive performance. And that's against, we saw Auburn just take Georgia to the wire a week ago. We saw that same Arkansas offense put up, I think, 34 against LSU. So they're not just completely incompetent. But now, are you going to see A&M put up those kind of numbers every single week? No. They're going to face better offenses. I think they're going to probably face a better one this Saturday. But certainly, especially on that defensive front, they have really, truly started living up to, I think, that recruiting prowess that we all saw, because as well as A&M has recruited just as a whole in recent years, the defensive line recruiting has just been otherworldly. Like that, and that 2022 class in particular, you look at A&M had something like 18 top 100 recruits, and 6 or 7 of them were defensive linemen. It was absurd. And you kind of wonder, it's well, how are they going to play all those guys? But now you're starting to see where almost all those guys are getting run, whether it's in blitz packages, it's third down packages. They have just wave after wave of that blue chip talent that for the past 2 weeks, in SEC play, really has pretty much asserted its will on the opposing offenses. So as an A&M fan, you just hope and pray that continues.
At the outset, I referenced the expectation of this game, and this is becoming a yearly expectation for this game. And it's kind of strange because outside of a few of these contests, it hasn't been a game that's decided a division championship to go to the SEC title, but it's been this dynamic where A&M comes into the SEC. There's a lot of hope there, despite not winning a conference title in the Big 12 for a long time, going back to 1998. But the recruiting footprint, Johnny Manziel obviously made his splash. Kevin Sumlin was doing well in recruiting. You bring on a big time coach who's won a national title. Alabama's just Alabama, and there's just been some type of buzz or energy around this game and this matchup for several years now.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's exciting for A&M fans is it kind of feels like this is the first year where we've gotten to the week of the game, and the game actually looks like it's going to live up to all that hype that we had heard about it. Because for the past two seasons, in 2021 and 2022, you had A&M ranked in the preseason top 10. You had a lot of that back and forth with Jimbo and Saban over NIL and recruiting and all this. But then each of the past 2 years, A&M was already a two-loss team by the time this game came around. And so as far as actual SEC implications, it was kind of dead in the water. Now, those ended up being two great games. Of course, both, as you referenced, both decided on the final play. But for A&M fans, I think it was a little bit hollow because even in the year that we won, you still knew we still needed a ton of help if we actually wanted to win the SEC. You needed Bama to lose another game. You obviously had to pretty much win all of your other games the rest of the way. So, and this is the only time since 2016, I believe, where you have A&M and Bama facing off, where the winner is going to be by themselves in first place in the SEC West. So, yeah, for an A&M fan, it's not just about playing Bama. Everyone, loves playing Bama, gets up for that game. But the fact that it also means that we're playing meaningful football in Week 6. We're not just sitting here, just hoping to win a game just to piss in Bama's Cheerios.
Absolutely. Jimbo Fisher, obviously, much controversy around him just based on how much money he's making versus the results and what the expectations were and what he's being paid to do. I believe this is is this 7? 6?
6.
Year 6. Yeah, so we're looking at 2018 being year number 1, and the records have basically been Kevin Sumlin records. I've seen that comparison made a zillion times after 50 games, after this many games, after that many games, and that's what it is at this point. Is there any real thought that if this season doesn't meet expectations, whatever those are, I don't know, I would have my certain expectations. I don't know what they are for the powers that be. That Jimbo Fisher, despite the massive buyout because of the deep pockets, that there could be a change.
I mean, I think that's on the table. Certainly, everyone involved hopes we don't have to go down that road, because the hope is that we, do have a good season and you have an outcome where you can say, okay, no, like we feel like things are back on track. This team has a positive outlook on the future, and everyone moves forward with Jimbo, and everybody's happy. But whether that's, and I don't know what the exact number is either. I always kind of put it like, if A&M went 7-5, I really do feel like they probably would find the money for that buyout, because as insane as it is, like it's north of $75 million that they would pay him to walk out the door. I mean, if you're going 7-5 a year after you went 5-7, I think just the writing on the wall would be, this is not working. And ultimately, as big as that financial hit would be, you run the risk of doing more long-term damage to the program by keeping a guy around that if you know he's not the guy, and your opponents know he's not the guy, recruits know he's not the guy, you could tank your program for 5-10 years if you wait too long, and then you're just playing catch up for what you should have done 1 or 2 years ago. But hopefully things go well and we don't have to cross that road.
It is kind of an interesting football program, Robert. I'm not sharing anything new with you. When you combine the resources and the state of Texas, where football is king, it's so important. So you add up a lot of positives in terms of a rabid fan base, resources, Texas, the SEC, all those things coming together. Then you look at this history of fielding good football teams, but not great football teams, not reaching elite status on the field, not winning a conference championship since '98. I don't know that there's another program out there for the length of time. You can look right in the state at Texas and say, okay, well, they've underachieved for close to 15 years now, but just prior to that were obviously national championship game appearances and titles. Uh, I got to think that this, I don't even know where this fan base's collective thoughts are about, can we finally get there?
I mean, I think A&M fans are, I wouldn't say impatient, but certainly A&M fans, I feel like that we are doing all the right things, just as fans, as a school, as a football program. That A&M technically checks all the boxes that you would want to build a great college football program. Like you said, you've got a rabid fan base in the largest stadium in the SEC. You're in the middle of one of the biggest recruiting hotbeds in the country. You play in one of the premier conferences. Uh, there's whether it's financially, geographically, there's really not many better places to be. And so it seems like A&M should have all the ingredients to make that happen. And so is it frustrating that it really has not come together? Yeah, I would say so. And I think specific to the Jimbo Fisher era, that's why Jimbo was brought in. That's why they paid him that huge contract, because they wanted someone with those skins on the wall that had done it before to come do it here. And I think that's still on the table. I think especially kind of the trajectory of this team that we're seeing this season. I think most A&M fans are feeling really good right now. But yeah, in the long term, I think everyone's ready for it to happen, because there's there's no reason that it shouldn't. A&M is not in Indiana or Ohio, or not Ohio State, Iowa State, and that's no disrespect to those programs. They occasionally will have great years and occasionally have better years than we do. But I think those programs, if they're being honest, would say, yeah, but we know that, like, resources wise, and when you put all the ingredients in the pot, we know, like, we're not going to be Ohio State, we're not going to be Georgia. And I think A&M says, look, we don't have the winning tradition of those schools, but outside of that, there's nothing else that we lack for. And so we're ready to take that next step.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, get geared up for Alabama and Texas A&M. Join Robert at Good Bull Hunting there on SB Nation. Robert, we appreciate you stopping by, breaking things down for us.
Absolutely, man. Gig 'em.